American people need to understand the federal government is already prosecuting minority report type crimes, the potential of criminality. And the way that they're doing it is through things like deliberate ignorance. So Donald Trump was prosecuted for election denying. You're disrupting Congress's duty, even though they completed their duty, because you're engaging in something that has a potential of criminality. And a potential of criminality has never been an offense in the United States.
Hey, so we're here the day after Election Day.
How did we get here, Sean? It's the future.
It is the future. But what I think everybody needs to know is that this episode has been recorded approximately, 4 days prior to the election, right?
Yep.
So we're 4 days prior to, and this is not an episode where we're making a prediction of who's going to win. The purpose of this episode is to help people understand how we got to where we're at, because there were a number of lawsuits that were filed in the state of Virginia, in potentially other states that I know you were looking into, and you'll tell us if you found anything.
Yep.
And then really what's gone on in Lancaster County and York County in Pennsylvania with some of the allegations of election fraud. And obviously we're going to talk a little bit about what transpired. I believe it was in Oregon, with devices that were used in ballot box fires and containing the Free Gaza message, and sort of what yours and my explanation of that is with respect to democracy, right? And
that's
protecting
absolutely
the
right. Yep.
So, give us an overview of sort of what the legal landscape has been. And by the way, it's good to see you. We haven't had a chance to connect much other than some text messages, because you were taking names and kicking ass at the Fifth Circus of Appeals.
Man. I was in the sixth, but let me tell you, and listen, the audio of that oral argument is posted on this little, it's not really a podcast, it's this audio thing I have called De Novo, where important cases, I just throw them up there. If I argue them, or if they're argued in front of the Supreme Court, I do just a slight little analysis on it. So feel free to check that out. But yeah, I was in front of the Sixth Circuit, and I was in front of Judge White, Judge Davis, and then Judge Clay. And I was arguing a case where this is pretty interesting stuff when it comes to appellate law. And I hate to digress, but it'll be fun. So there's this case, Global Tech, that came out a long time ago. And that was a patent case, but it really related to whether or not somebody could be found guilty of deliberate ignorance, or what we call willful blindness. Now, if American people don't know about deliberate ignorance, they really should, because it is a legal principle that has been created that has absolutely exploded and caused people to be indicted for things that are really negligence type crimes. And the idea of deliberate ignorance or willful blindness is if you deliberately ignore the existence or high probability of a fact of criminality, then you can be considered guilty of the offense. Here's a great example, right? I think I might have even talked about this on, I talked about it at that presentation that you and I gave in Virginia, of all places.
In Norfolk.
In Norfolk, that's right. So you've heard this all before, Sean, but for those who don't know, let's imagine that you are standing in an airport and it's 1979, let's say, and this handsome guy walks up to you. He's got the flowing blonde hair. He's got the widespread collars. It's like a powder blue suit, right? And he's got two suitcases, and those are definitely Johnny Depp cheekbones that are going on right there, right? Just gorgeous man, right?
And I think we used to call those zoot suits.
Zoot suits, that's right. Okay. So you got the zoot suit in front of you. It's Johnny Depp, and he's flanked by two absolutely beautiful flight attendants. Maybe we're flying Pan Am, and you're like, oh, this guy is a very curious individual. Handsome, well-dressed, two suitcases. Why does he need that many suitcases? Why is he carrying his own suitcases? There's a lot going on here. And he walks up to you and he says, hey, listen, I'm going to give you $20,000, $20,000 if you take these suitcases and get them to Miami for me. Right. And we're in Bogota. I forgot to mention we're in Bogota. So
Colombia.
20,000. That sounds like a good deal right there. Just for the, I don't even need to look inside. No, don't look inside. Don't do that. Don't even talk about looking inside. You're not going to look inside. Well, I take the $20,000. I take the suitcases. I hand them over at the desk there, check my ticket. I get into Miami and customs says, could you open your bag, please? And of course, now you're like choking and like, releasing your collar here, and they find 30 kilos of cocaine shoved in there. Of course they did, right? Because nobody offers you $20,000 to get on the airplane with the suitcases unless there's something worth a lot more than $20,000 in those suitcases, right? And we've got two of them. So that's willful blindness. You deliberately ignored what was inside. But here's the thing. Here's the battle between the Sixth Circuit and I right now. The Sixth Circuit doesn't care if there's cocaine in the suitcase. If the facts were enough where there could have been cocaine in the suitcase, they want to be able to convict you of drug trafficking. That's what they want to do. That is the strangest thing. If somebody comes to a clinic and presents a whole bunch of red flags of being a drug diverter, but they really were taking medication for a painful condition, they want to be able to convict a physician in absence of actual evidence of wrongdoing. That's where deliberate ignorance is absolutely exploding. This is one of the problems. We have federal statutes that have modified themselves from convicting somebody of actual criminal conduct and now convicting people of the potential of criminal conduct. Remember, Donald Trump gave over the office of the presidency. Donald Trump handed it over on the same day he was supposed to. And the inauguration happened and everybody did just fine. But the potential of not handing over the office of the presidency is what's being criminalized. American people need to understand the federal government is already prosecuting minority report type crimes, the potential of criminality. And the way that they're doing it is through things like deliberate ignorance. So why does this have anything to do with our conversation today, Sean? Well, remember, Donald Trump was prosecuted for election denying. That's really what it is. It says it many times in the indictment that
I wasn't aware that election denying was a crime.
Yes, it is a minority report crime because it leads to the potential of you not handing over the office when you're supposed to, right? You're disrupting Congress's duty, even though they completed their duty, because you're engaging in something that has a potential of criminality. And a potential of criminality has never been an offense in the United States. So when we sit here today and we talk about what's going to happen after the election, remember, there is already somebody facing felonies for saying that the election was interfered with. But here's the thing. We already have hard and fast proof of election interference, right? Everybody at home, do a quick Google search. Maybe there's an Elon Musk tweet that pulls up, but maybe trust something else. Do a quick Google search. How many countries allow you to cast a vote for an elected leader without showing your ID? Without
None.
Showing your ID. I'm not aware. I think even in Iraq, they dyed your thumb blue.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know that they actually have IDs.
Well, no, they don't. They dyed your thumb blue. That's your ID, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to vote twice. It's just that if your left thumb is blue, I think it was left or right. And it was like a symbol of like nationalism, like thumbs up. I got a blue thumb. I voted. I mean, that was a great PR campaign. And that's, I guess, if you want to have democracy in a country like that's what you do. But international election observers constantly go into other countries and observe those elections. We don't use them. And yet everybody gets to vote. So what are we going to go over today? Sean, you said it right. We are day after the election. A lot of stuff that we don't even know about has already happened. But here's the thing. We already know the law related to elections, which is what I'm going to talk about today. We already know the current cases that are very important with respect to elections. And we already know how these challenges are likely to maneuver through the courts. One thing is for sure. I do not believe when people hear this, we are going to have a winner of this election. And the reason why is because these districts are already saying they are going to be delayed counting votes. And here's why they're going to delay counting votes. Because there are local leaders who are Democrats in those places, and they understand that if Donald Trump is going to contest the election, he's going to have all of his election contests completed by January 6th. He's got to complete it, which means he's got to get through the courts by January 6th. Why did his challenges stop last time? Because January 6th happened. And the Supreme Court did not grant cert on his election case. If they had granted cert because it was closer, then we probably would have had a delay in the election. So right off the top, we know exactly what's going to play out. The Supreme Court is going to reserve and not grant cert on anything before January 6th unless it is incredibly, incredibly close. That's the only reason why they granted cert on Bush v. Gore, because there was no other way.
And I think that's the right thing. I mean, if you're talking about razor thin margins, I kind of have my own opinion on this. And again, like I said, we're doing this several days prior to the actual in-person voting on November 5th. I actually believe that one of the candidates is going to get 300 electoral votes, possibly more. And I actually believe that that same individual is potentially going to win the popular vote as well. I don't believe that things are as close as what the mainstream media is saying. And let me ask you this question, right? Because I'm an opinion person, right? I'm not a legal scholar, and yeah. I make that perfectly clear, right? I'm an
that's
opinion person.
That's where we butt heads, Sean. That's where we always butt heads, and it's okay. I need to be more tolerant of opinions. I'm not. I'm just such a law guy. You know, I'm such a boring law guy, but I admit my flaws readily.
That's all right.
I admit my flaws. Yeah.
Listen, my wife points out my flaws at least 24 times a day. And why I say 24, because there's 24 hours in a day. So every hour I'm having a flaw pointed out. But
for me, it's my oldest daughter. Love you, Carson, but it's my oldest daughter. She's very quick.
but here's, so again, you know, as an opinion person, right? And you as the legal person, do you believe that if we are looking at a situation similar to what Ronald Reagan had, where he won 49 out of the 50 states. Now, I don't think this individual or either individual is going to win 49 out of 50. I'd be shocked if they did. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I just don't think California is in the
no, but I think California, if you kind of look at the map right now, Trump is actually doing way better on voting in counties that have traditionally been, you know, Democrat or purple. But irrespective, here's my question to you. And I think I know the answer based on what you were saying just a minute ago. If hypothetically, let's say Trump wins 300 electoral votes, and he also wins the popular vote, which I know the popular vote doesn't mean a daggum thing because presidents are put in place based on the electoral college.
Thank you for saying that, Sean. Thank you. Because whenever a Democrat wins the popular vote but doesn't win electoral, they say, abolish the electoral college. When I'm kind of like, well, listen, if you want to change the rules after you've already played the game to justify a victory, like that's a really fun way to live. Okay. All right. So let's do that with the Super Bowl. Let's do that.
So Trump, let's put the popular vote aside. Trump gets 300 electoral votes. Not even close. No matter how much contesting the Harris campaign does with their deployed 300 attorneys that they already have all around the country, Supreme Court's not taking this thing up. We are going to see the transfer of power back to Donald Trump on January 6th if he has 300 electoral votes, because that is not a razor thin margin. Is that a fair statement?
Unless it is razor thin by nature of incredibly close votes in multiple states that lead to it. It's certainly possible, right? We have razor thin margins in Pennsylvania. We have razor thin margins in Maricopa County, Arizona. I mean, it's really coming down to a very small place. And plus, Maricopa County has already said it's going to take 7 decades in order to actually count the votes because their job is so tough, right? So tough that it's going to take so long to count votes. We know what they're doing down there. They're just getting ready to delay so they can justify whatever happens. So here's a few things we gotta teach the American people. Elections are federally governed by federal law, but they are also state governed by state law. And there are certain things that belong to the federal government. This beautiful Fifth Circuit Mississippi case tells us. You can read it if you want to. We'll have Mario post it in the show notes. There are some things that belong to the feds and some things that belong to the states. And here's why. when we have an election, it's not just the president. In fact, one thing Jack Smith criticized Donald Trump for is that when he was litigating the outcome of the election, he didn't litigate the results related to any other candidates. And I was like, touche, right? If the election is fraudulent, that has down the ballot consequences. But it really does. And a lot of those down the ballot people are people that are much more important in the states. We've got state congressmen, state senators. We may have a governor battle in some states. And that's really important to think about. So there are some state aspects of election. There are automatic vote recount triggers associated with some states and some jurisdictions. There are also forensic audits that can be conducted in some states and some jurisdictions. And there's a process by which that should be concluded. But here's where the rub comes into play. When are those triggered? Usually within a certain percentage, within a certain margin, those automatic recounts and forensic audits are going to be triggered. And if you're not within a certain margin, those won't be triggered. And if they are, there's going to be a specific delay. The second battleground is going to happen when we decide who gets to observe those automatic processes. Usually it's the elected government of the place that we're dealing with. But do we really believe, no offense, Sean, that Fulton County is going to do a really good job on any sort of recount? I mean, there are some good elected leaders in Fulton County, but listen, everything that's happened in Fulton County in the last 2 years has been absolutely bonkers. I mean, you've got Fawny messing around. You've got that crazy, what is it, Young Thug? What is the name of the rapper? Who is it? There's this murder trial that's been going on for a long time where the judge has just been absolutely nuts. Do I trust a circuit judge in Fulton County? They've done some weird things, even the judge on Donald Trump's case. So you've got local elected leaders, which means you're going to have battles in there. Then you've got politics just messing around with this whole process and how these things are played out. That's where Donald Trump's phone call, "Find me the votes," comes into play, right? It's a matter of how you count it and where you count it and what you do that can really change the outcome of the election. And with Jack Smith already saying that some of those efforts to communicate with other politicians are going to be considered elements of a conspiracy, you see that the first thing that will happen if Donald Trump starts trying to litigate these things is they're going to go straight to Judge Chutkan and say, this man is violating his bond conditions. He's committing the same crime all over again, Judge. And what will Judge Chutkan do? That's going to get a little bit bonkers, Sean.
Yeah, I agree with you. As crazy as I think Chutkan is, I don't think she would dare to cross that line. And here's the other thing that I really wish.
I can't say Judge Chutkan is crazy. I respect the duties of a federal judge. I just don't know how she's going to handle it. That's all I would say.
Again, you're the boring legal guy, and I know what you have to say.
Yep. But I just got to jump in and say I have all due respect for all judicial officers as an officer of the court. If anybody's listening.
I do want to say this, okay?
Yeah.
I don't have contempt for any judicial officer. I have the utmost respect for officers of the court that uphold the Constitution, that uphold their legal responsibilities, their ethical and moral responsibilities to always do the right thing. I have no contempt for that. What I have contempt for are individuals that have the power to release information at a period in time where it could be construed as election interference. I think, we've talked about Jack Smith ad nauseum. I think people should look at our prior episodes where we talk about what are his powers and were they constitutional and are they constitutional? But I really hope that somebody like a Chutkan, okay, who there's no doubt hates Donald Trump. I think it's evident. I don't think even she is going to put herself into a position where it could compromise her future as a sitting judge. I think that would raise a lot of concerns. But here's the other thing that I really hope people consider. We are talking about the most consequential election of our lifetime. There's no doubt about it. This election means more to this country, but also means more to the world than any other election in my lifetime up to this point. And we have a lot of things that are pending right now. We have the unrest in the Middle East with Israel and Iran and the Houthis and Hezbollah and what's going on in Lebanon. We have unrest that's getting ready to potentially blow up in China with what's going on with Taiwan. We have significant issues still going on between Russia and Ukraine. We have things going on around the world that are going to have a significant impact on the United States, our national security, things here domestically. We've got to get our stuff together. And, we've got to have a defined leader of this country, whether it's Kamala Harris or whether it's Donald Trump, but we've got to have a peaceful transfer of power. At the end of the day, to me, I've made this very clear. January 6th, regardless of the optics, regardless of whatever your opinions are on it, it was a bad day for the United States. It was a bad day. Now, there's a lot of things that we've talked about and we've explored that were blown way out of proportion, but it was a bad event.
Well, I hate to digress with that,
Yeah,
Sean.
go ahead.
And I do have a bombshell to drop based on your prior comments.
Let's do it.
But let me just address January 6th. January 6th is completely predictable. When you disenfranchise a mass of voters, and when you call them garbage, and when you tell them that their leader is corrupt, and when you identify them as being racist, misogynistic people, and you deprive them of their voice through the legal channels, and you deprive them of their voice through other means, and you defame them in the press, and you run news cycles 24 hours a day talking about anybody in a red hat being a racist person, you start to get a disgruntled element of society. Listen, Oklahoma City and the sort of the red movement that kind of happened back in the 90s, while I absolutely do not condone anything like that, what you need to do if you are an elected leader is look deep inside and say, why are people going so far as to plot against the United States? And we know exactly why. I mean, we had the Branch Davidian compound fire where babies were burning as a result of what the ATF did. And we had, what was it? I keep wanting to say Ruby Ridge, but it was that other compound that was invaded. Maybe that was the name of it, but
I think it was Ruby Ridge.
Was it Ruby Ridge? Yeah, that was that other compound that was considered incredibly egregious. There were a lot of people around that time starting to get radicalized. And Thomas Hobbes, back in the British Revolution, tells us that when the base of power starts to see a radicalized force growing inside of a country, they need to look back at themselves. And this goes along with what you're saying. They need to look back at themselves and say, how are we doing as leaders right now? Right? The minimum that they were supposed to give us was a free and fair election where we all felt that our voice was heard and we could accept the outcome. They didn't give us that. The minimum that they were supposed to give us was the ability of a fair press that would report accurately on what happened. They didn't give us that. The minimum they should have given us was the ability for our free speech to be heard on social media networks and blogs and all of that. But no, they started to criminalize that. They are taking away the minimums of what they should afford us under the Constitution, and they are actually surprised when people start to get disgruntled. That's shocking to me. And then they double down by indicting 800 and some of these people and putting crimes on them that never deserve to be put on them. The Supreme Court had to take away after a while. And what you get left with is people playing with fire and surprised that they get burnt. That's shocking to me, Sean. What you need to do is be a better leader. If I had a Navy unit or a Marine Corps platoon under my command and they were getting rowdy and they were committing violent acts against the local population and they were defaming the local civilians and doing all sorts of violent things, am I going to say, these are just rowdy guys, I'm going to court-martial all of them and get rid of them? No, I'm going to look deep inside as a leader and I'm going to say, what the hell did I do wrong? But here's the bombshell. I won't make you wait too long. Merrick Garland has very quietly.
And before you say this,
yeah.
Can we have some of that music playing in the background? You dropped the bomb on me.
Oh, yeah. You
I like
dropped
that.
the
I'm sorry.
bomb on me,
Yeah.
baby.
I'm just trying to
You
add
dropped
some
the
levity to
bomb.
this. So let's talk about what one of my favorite human beings, Merrick Garland, did.
Maybe that'll be my new hit single. The new version of "You Dropped the Bomb on Me," and we could just have like a shock and awe video playing. It would be perfect.
Oh,
That should be our intro, Sean.
That may be good for a hat or a shirt.
Yeah.
You dropped the bomb on
me. I used to during the Iraq War, despite the fact that I was a Marine, I got my way through college and law school as a DJ, and I had this shirt that said "Beats Not Bombs" on it. And some people, I just did it because it like really stoked people. They were like, "What are you talking about? Like, we're fighting for our freedom over there." And I was like, "Yeah, but I think that we should all just have a rave and have some fun. Like, we don't need to drop bombs on these people. They love clapping and dancing too."
I haven't been to a rave since like, good Lord, 19.
Beats not bombs. I mean, we should be able to drop bombs, but if we can use beats instead, let's do it.
Hey, let's do it, man.
That's what I say. Okay. So Merrick Garland, he is just a wonderful person.
He's horrible.
I mean, no, come on, Sean. He's a nice guy. He was supposed to be on the Supreme Court, and then everybody screwed around. He didn't get on there, so he's a little bit angry, right? And now he wants to make sure that a Democrat stays in office, and he also wants to make sure that if Donald Trump screws around, that he's able to do something about it. So what has he done? He has quietly created, and we're going to play a video here on this. He's quietly created the Justice Department Election Threats Task Force.
Unbelievable.
Yes. And he did this, I posted about it, but it didn't go as viral as the DOD directive authorizing killing civilians. But
that was crazy. Let me tell you.
Absolutely nuts.
That was freaking crazy. The number of hits and views that
113,000. 113,000. So go to the last episode. We talk about it. And then there's obviously a link to the blog post there where I thoroughly discuss this. This is my bread and butter. This is my job. But I did a little looking around and I said, okay, Merrick Garland has created an election threats task force. What's an election threats task force? Well, he has been slowly padding this idea of Russian disinformation being involved in the election. Why? So that he can justify the deployment of resources into the local election offices for the purpose of election monitoring by the Department of Justice, who is currently opposing Donald Trump in a federal criminal case. And he has decided to create the Election Threats Task Force, and they are looking out for threats. Now, if Merrick Garland would have gone, and we're going to play the video, but if Merrick Garland would have gone on video and said, "I'm very concerned about Donald Trump being involved in this election and the potential for election threats coming from MAGA red hat people," of course, there would have been an outcry. If they would have passed this DOD directive that we talked about last episode, and they would have said, "We're afraid that people from MAGA are going to get violent and we need to avoid this, so we should authorize, those people to be killed," they would have had violence. So what do? They're very slippery, sneaky people. The DOD directive is launched as an intelligence initiative, so it slips under the radar. And this election interference threats task force is designed as an initiative to stop Russian misinformation and interference in our election. So nobody pays attention to it. But right now, there are FBI agents, there are federal prosecutors, there are Department of Justice officials that have been sent to the battleground places to be involved in the count, simultaneously with deadly force being authorized by the military for civil unrest and disturbance if there's an imminent threat and a senior official approves. Sean, this is the second leg on the table of we're getting ready for something, right? And so here's what's going to happen. This is before the election. I am making this prediction, but they are logging and monitoring all of the actions of MAGA people, right? Towards election workers, towards poll workers. And if Donald Trump contests this election, if he takes issue with it, they are going to read that laundry list out as 1,000 different January 6th that were caused by Donald Trump, because he is the proponent of ID for people, of avoiding voter interference, of all of that. And so if they screw around with the election, if the people in those districts screw around with the election, and the DOJ observers are kind of capturing all of the negative information that comes out from people who are disgruntled by it, and they've got this investigation and laundry list, they're going to start a new Department of Justice investigation that even if Donald Trump takes office, they will try to continue through independent counsel to try to go against him and indict him one more time for election interference. This is a significant development, Sean, that has snuck past the American people. I've sent press releases out on this and have not heard from mainstream media. This is the reason why this show exists, because I've got a YouTube video. We're going to play this right now before your comments, Sean. I've got a YouTube video of Merrick Garland talking about this, and nobody else is.
Let's see what he has to say.
We launched Election Threats Task Force to respond to a dangerous increase in violent threats against the public servants who administer our elections. We did so because countless Americans were enduring terrible threats simply for doing their civic duty. And we did so because threats to election workers constitute threats to our democracy itself. That includes recently reported activities by Iran to compromise former President Trump's campaign and to avoid an election outcome that it regards as against its interests. Those recently reported Iranian activities also include efforts to obtain access to individuals who themselves have access to the presidential campaigns of both political parties.
You hear that, Sean?
That's just amazing to me. So as you were talking, and I'm listening to what you're sharing with us, I started trying to formulate this statement in my mind. And here's what I think those in the Democratic Party are missing. It's not that I resonate with Donald Trump. It's not that I love the things that come out of his mouth. Now, I think he's a very different person this time around than he was in 2020 or in 2016. Just his mannerisms, how he does things. Now, he does revert back to some of that interesting language from time to time. But it's not that that everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth resonates with me. You know what it is? It's what comes out of Kamala Harris's mouth and Tim Walz's mouth, and their lack of policy doesn't resonate with me.
And you know how I know that? Because I would love some Bill Clinton right now. I know you're like mad at me. I'm sorry.
No, I'm actually not.
I would love some Bill Clinton. I would even tolerate a little bit of Barack Obama. I mean, there was some things that I didn't like in terms of the politicization of the military, and he made us withdraw from land that we took and secured for him. And then, our lives are in danger because he wants to make troop levels look lower. And then, of course, Benghazi happens because he also wants to not admit that he needs reinforcements because of the Arab Spring. That's fine. People died. That's okay. That's fine.
But here's the thing,
the
right?
country wasn't a mess. At least that was only in, other countries.
But see, for me, here's my position. Okay. And I resent the comments from Hillary Clinton of a basket of deplorables.
Who's that?
This
Hillary?
Demented, senile old woman who's going to be sharing a suite with Uncle Joe shortly. But
isn't that Taylor Swift's mom?
It could be.
It could be.
It could be. There's a significant resemblance there. And if I were Taylor Swift, I would be very concerned. That's what I'm going to look like when I'm Hillary.
You know why I say that? Because Satan is clearly the daddy. I mean,
there's no doubt.
There's no doubt.
There's no doubt. But
he wasn't a federal judge. I could say that.
Here's where I'm coming from. Okay. Mm-hmm. I am a person that doesn't believe in violence, but I believe that you have to respond to violence in an effective manner to be able to shut it down. Those
are BB guns behind you?
Pellet guns.
Pellet guns.
Okay.
Check.
Paint guns. Mm-hmm. So for me, this election isn't about rah, 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 MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Okay. Sure. I'm a proud American. I love my country. I'll do anything for my country, as I've proven that over my life. But for me, it's about upholding the laws of our land. Okay. This mass allowance of illegal immigrants to come into this country and to allow them to commit crimes against American citizens, against a 12-year-old girl in Texas, against a mother of 5, all these crimes that we've been seeing. The individual who decapitated a man and was kicking his head around a park like it was a soccer ball. For me,
What does that have to do with an election?
it has everything to do with an election.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm with you.
For
I'm
me,
trying. Yeah.
no, hang on. I'm going to get there, man.
All right.
For me, I'm about wanting a person to uphold the laws of our land. And what Donald Trump has shown me when he was president for the 4 years as number 45, he upheld the laws of this land. He put America first. He created policies that were good for this country. Corporations repatriatized money that needed to come back to this country. Manufacturing was on the rise. Costs were down. This country was prospering. Under this current administration, and because Kamala Harris has not separated herself, and she has even said in numerous interviews where she has been given the opportunity to say, what will you do differently than Joe Biden if elected president of the United States? And her comment has been, I can't think of anything. So for me, when I hear, and this is where I'm coming from, I'll tie it together here. When I hear people like the sitting president of the United States call somebody like myself who's supporting Donald Trump, not because he's Donald Trump, but because of what he has done historically as a president of this country and what his policies are. And the fact that he's put a coalition of respected independents and Democrats as well as Republicans together. And he's putting the law of the land first. Being called garbage by the sitting president of the United States is a problem for me because I don't see things his way. Being
doubt,
called
Sean.
deplorable
No doubt.
That's
been
where
covered.
I'm coming from. But this is my point, Ron.
Okay.
This is why people are rebelling. Now, you don't have to rebel with violence, even though, unfortunately, there's probably going to be some stupid people that do some stupid things because it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't condone it. I don't support it. I'm praying to God that it is peaceful.
And that's the problem. They've removed the legitimate channels of protest. No, I'm with you on the garbage thing. It's just that I have a hard time because everybody talks about that and they avoid the real issues. And I think that we need to understand the real issues. Like, for instance, Biden says garbage. Merrick Garland secretly deploys an election task force to contested jurisdictions. What gets more airtime? The garbage comment.
The garbage comment.
Donald Trump in a garbage truck.
I agree with you.
This is why, on the limited time that we have on this show to educate the American people about what's really going on, garbage stuff doesn't really come up for me as anything being too significant.
I get it. But what resonates with the American people is when you have somebody like Mark Cuban talking about how women around Donald Trump aren't intelligent, strong women.
I don't think that resonates with the American people.
The blowback that Mark Cuban has received from that is incredible, to the point where he's had to actually come out. And Mark Cuban is not somebody who apologizes. But I agree with you. What we want people to understand is that there are task forces being created by the current administration to thwart civil unrest.
Exactly.
People having a First Amendment right to protest.
Well, it's
when they
not
disagree.
Just to thwart civil unrest. It's to monitor election hate, because that's a crime. I don't know why the Department of Justice should have any jurisdiction over handling complaints. And this is the first problem with Merrick Garland's task force. I don't know why they have any jurisdiction over handling complaints that happen in a state to election officials who are state officials, just because the president of the United States is involved in the election. We have allowed the recounts to be handled by states. Why do they need federal monitors unless they ask for some sort of assistance? What money is that from? Who's appointed to this special task force? And is that something that has been delegated to the Department of Justice from Congress? Remember, everybody out there, the power flows first from the Constitution, the document that we've all tacitly agreed to. And then it goes from the Constitution to the people that are in the separate branches of government to take care of their separate items. Just go watch some Schoolhouse Rock if this is a hard thing for you to understand, right? Then the power goes, the power's like a river. It goes from the Constitution to the branches, and then from those branches to these other people, bureaucrats, agencies, all of that stuff. And when we ask ourselves, what granted Merrick Garland the authority to occupy states and to monitor those elections? And he's saying, well, this is because of our power to monitor the federal laws of the United States and make sure that those laws aren't violated. Oh, okay. So the Federal Bureau of Investigation has become a national police force that can be deployed anywhere in order to ensure that state crimes are being reviewed and prosecuted? No, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So just understand that by voting for somebody like Joe Biden, you have authorized a large amount of federal power to be condensed into battleground states and used for the purposes of election. Sean, I want to get to some of these cases because they're huge. I was on Newsmax last week and talked about the Mississippi case. We might even be able to throw a video of that at the end just so that folks can.
And can you give a recap of that for those who are not aware or familiar with the Mississippi case?
Well, I'm going to go bigger on it too, because they only give me a minute or two. This is another reason why I love this show, because on the news, I get a minute or two, I get a question, and often the question is not the artful one that I'm looking for. Love all of the people I work with, but I don't get to craft their questions. So I got to answer sometimes like a football coach and get to other things. You know, we're going to get pucks deep. We're going to get pucks in the net, and we're going to score goals. That's what we're going to do. I'm used to saying that for my hockey
I was going to say that's dating back to your hockey days.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's the same football coach talk. It's just all sports talk, I guess.
You know, one of these days, just to honor you, I'm going to, now that we're hitting the colder months here, I'm going to wear my Boston Bruins throwback jersey for you one day on this show.
Let's have hockey day. Yeah, we're going to schedule it.
I love hockey, man. Yeah. I do. I love watching the Panthers. I love watching the Red Wings, the Blackhawks. I'm going to digress. Do you think the Blackhawks are ever going to change their name?
Let's
not go there. Let's move on.
Well, so interesting thing happened. The first game for the Blackhawks is the Utah, and some are saying the Utah. So the Hawks are playing the Utah. For the first game. Whew. Yeah, that happened. I don't think this world is real, Sean.
Yeah, we're going to
have hockey day, but let's talk about Mississippi Day. So the Fifth Circuit is the wild child. They're the wild child of all the circuits. Love them to death. They're the wild child. I'm scheduled to argue in front of them not too far from now, over there in New Orleans. I think the heat sometimes gets to them, though. But in this case, I actually really support what they decided to do. So there was an election case that's been brought that Donald Trump's team and Republicans are kind of battling these election fights ahead of time in the court, but they're not getting a lot of press. I did this coverage on the Mississippi case because I brought it to the attention of Newsmax by sending the talking points, and then they had me on in order to talk about it. And here's what happened in Mississippi. There was a law that basically said that we're going to count ballots after the election day. And people said, well, wait a second, that doesn't make a lot of sense because that's just going to delay the election. It's going to delay us getting accurate results for the election. And they looked to see the Fifth Circuit looked to see whether there was any authority or source to say that election day really should be election day. And there is, in fact. Back in, I think, 1844, Congress became concerned that if you allow people to vote after election day, it is rife with fraud. Back then, they had a harder time controlling elections than we do. We think it's messy now. No, it was messy back then. And what they realized, unless they require everybody to go to the polls on a specific day, you get a lot more instances of fraud. So Congress said, we're going to have one election day and one election day only. And if it's too hard for you to get out to election day, pardon my French, tough shit. Get up or plan your mail-in ballot. This is the least that you have to do, right? Pay your taxes, vote. Not too hard. Let's do that.
Can I ask you a question before you go any further?
Yeah.
Is there anything in the law that says after election day, it is perfectly legal for you to count ballots because you just couldn't do it on election day. I mean, am I asking a stupid question?
Yeah, well, there's various laws, so no, it's not a stupid question, but sometimes counting ballots takes a long time. The reason why the news comes out with such a quick number is because they've already got very, very complicated models baked in, and they realize that once the scale tips in one direction, it's just never going to go back. Because remember, the number of times that you flip a coin is going to average out to 50-50 the closer you get to a higher number of flipping the coin. It's going to be uneven to start, maybe my first 5 flips, but by 100 or 150 flips, it's going to take a lot to adjust that number off of 50-50, right? So as each vote comes in and we know how the votes have historically been, our statistical sample is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's becoming more accurate every minute. And it reaches the point where that statistical sample of the population has become so accurate that it changes things. But here's why we saw, I'm digressing, but it's really important. Here's why we saw huge issues in the last election. There was a higher percentage of mail-in ballots that were calculated later, and mail-in ballots, you would not as accurately predict how people were going to vote in mail-in ballots. And so it was throwing off the analytical models for determining who was going to be the winner of the election. That may or may not happen here, remains to be seen. But to answer your question, totally fine to count ballots after election day. They've got to be cast on election day. And the counting has to be done in a certain way. And you got to get it done, but you got to do it under certain parameters. So in Mississippi, they had this law and they kept it after COVID. This was a COVID law and they kept it after. And there are other states that have that same law. I believe Arizona has that same law. And there was a competing case in, I believe, the Ninth Circuit that said that, no, you can count ballots after Election Day. So the reason why I want to talk about Mississippi and the counting ballots after Election Day is because this is going to go to the Supreme Court, and it's going to be a massive challenge that is going to be very important today as you're listening to this, in the next few weeks as you're thinking about the election and determining the ultimate winner. Because right now you have the Fifth Circuit saying you can't vote after Election Day, and you have states across the country that have allowed and will allow votes to be counted as people are listening to this podcast right now. Votes are being cast and votes are being counted because those mail-in ballots have been delayed. If you mail your ballot in and you're an absentee voter on Election Day, your ballot should not be counted because it's going to be received by election officials outside of the time period of elections, and that is in violation of what Congress has said in 1844 and of our Constitution, which allows for one election day and allows the federal government to decide what that election day is. So if the Supreme Court is going to get on anything in this case, I believe it is going to be the split of authority, the split of circuits, the Fifth Circuit saying you can't vote after Election Day, and it's going to be other circuits saying you can, and other states. So I would imagine that Donald Trump is ready to file a lawsuit in every state, upholding that Fifth Circuit precedent in every state where they are counting a single ballot afterwards, if he believes that those ballots would be more likely to be for Kamala Harris than himself, Donald Trump. That's where the challenge is going to be. That's going to be the most important case to watch as we move forward. And we could talk about some of the other, downstate cases, but that's what I'm really looking at. It's already ready for the Supreme Court. Fifth Circuit's already made their decision. So cert is petitioned for, and it will be very soon, and it'll be chalked up and ready for the Supreme Court for a pretty quick decision. I wouldn't be surprised if oral argument on something like that is going to be scheduled for mid-December. We'll see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big stuff.
It is. And, this is the stuff that doesn't get talked about in the mainstream media. And
unless I'm talking about it.
Well, okay, fair enough. But this is what bothers me, because both sides need to understand this stuff, because this is what leads to us having free and fair elections, not the talking points that are pushed out there by these individuals sitting with a little earpiece in their ear being told what to say by their studio producer.
Yep.
This is what's critical. This is what people should have been learning in their civics classes. This is what they should have been learning in history about how the Constitution was framed. What are the amendments? What are the Bill of Rights? All of these things that are so important that we seem to have lost as American citizens are understanding of. And you know what bothers me the most? When we have somebody who is immigrated to this country legally and they go through citizenship, these individuals know more about our Constitution. They know more about the history of this country than people born in this country, educated through the American education system.
I just talked to somebody who was French and received citizenship in the United States, and she said, yeah, you wouldn't pass the citizenship test right now. You're a lawyer. You wouldn't have passed the citizenship.
I believe it 100%.
I believe it 100%. But let's talk about other downstate cases that are going to mess with this Mississippi challenge. We've got one in Pennsylvania that's going to be fun.
Yeah, let's talk about this one.
Pennsylvania, the appellate court there ruled that mail-in ballots lacking handwritten dates, right? We weren't smart enough to be able to put a date on our return envelope on our ballot. We weren't able to follow instructions for voting, and we want our ballot to be counted. The Pennsylvania appellate court has said that the date requirement violates the state constitution's guarantee of free and equal elections, right? Listen, you don't put a date and a name on your assignment paper in second grade and you get a 0, right? You don't do it in fifth grade, you get a 0. You don't do it in college, you get a 0. You fail to put a date on a check and the check doesn't clear the financial institution. You get a 0 on writing a check to that person, right? Society has consequences for our failure to follow instructions and properly fill stuff out. If I go to a bank and I want to deposit $2 into my account and I fail to put a date on my deposit slip, the teller politely tells me to go put a date on it.
That's right.
Following instructions is kind of important. For some people, right?
I was going to say, do you think?
For some people. For others, following instructions is a violation of requiring instructions to be followed is a violation of the Constitution of Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Constitution does not require following instructions in order for your vote to be counted. Here's the problem with that. If they allow all of these ballots with no dates, the Mississippi case clashes with that, right? It says that if your date is after, then we've got a problem.
That's right.
A date is important in knowing when you filled that piece of paper out and when you put it in the box and how it got there. It's also important because if we're handwriting this stuff, we need to certify the day in which we are casting this if we're doing this before the election. You can't do a mail-in ballot too early, and in some states you can't do it too late. And so this is conflicting. That case will go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I do believe that Pennsylvania will ultimately not be successful in that challenge and that dates will be, again, I want to make dates great again, Sean. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will make dates great again. They're not so great right now. They're not very great at all when you don't have to put them on your ballot. So, best of luck to our country if the United States Supreme Court or the Pennsylvania Supreme Court says you do not have to properly fill out your ballot form and you can send it in, because who does that benefit?
Yeah.
I don't know whose voters are less likely to put a date.
I can't see the Supreme Court upholding that. I just can't. And as much as I'm not enamored with Sotomayor or Kagan, I think even they have to look at the law and they have to use common sense and they have to do the right thing for this country. I mean, let me ask you this question, right? Because there's so much in the way of calling into question the Constitution. And you may or may not be able to answer this question. I seem to think you can, but we'll see. So I constantly hear the Democrats, Kamala Harris, who has said Donald Trump wants to obliterate the Constitution, wants to do away with the Constitution. How? Where? I mean, every constitutional challenge that I've, not challenge, but, demonizing of the Constitution has come from pretty much the Democratic Party.
Well, how's he doing before the Supreme Court right now in terms of cases?
I think he's doing pretty daggum well.
I think he's doing pretty well. So the immunity case,
yeah,
won that one, right?
Yep.
I suppose we've got Judge Cannon and the Appointments Clause case, not up to the Supreme Court yet, but did pretty well. Pretty sure that in Trump v. Hawaii, this case where they accused him of being xenophobic and all of that with immigration. Pretty sure he did well on that one. How's Joe Biden doing? Not
Not
so
well.
good. And here's why. Because the Trump's people and the lawyers that work with Trump, they're more of a strict constructionalist type group, right? And I think Kamala Harris and Joe Biden operate from more of a revisionist history standpoint. You listen to Justice Jackson during oral arguments in the immunity case, and you become very clear about what that type of thinker is going to feel. Well, this will give him unchecked authority to do, and Kamala repeatedly tweets this. Donald Trump now has unchecked authority if he becomes president to do whatever he wants. You have modified the law to give selective immunity to a president for official acts, allowing him to murder people if he wants to. Well, the problem here is that we just didn't read if we think that. We didn't read the Supreme Court opinion. We didn't read the briefs. We didn't read the case law that discusses these issues. We didn't realize that in our 275 years or whatever of having these types of issues, that a president has never been indicted for something that was considered an official act. We really didn't read the history books and understand what was going on. No, what we're doing is we're taking our fear of what might happen in the future, and we're making that more important than the text of the documents and the law that we rely on as American people. That's kind of a legislating from the bench thing. That's been happening with the left a lot. They tend to legislate from the bench because they really can't get over the idea that the writing of the document, the law, the Constitution, equally applied to everybody, will cause a fair and balanced system. What they want to do is weigh down that document with good ideas and cause it to say something that it does not say, because they can't imagine a future in which they are not right. I'm imagining fully a future in which I'm not right. These cases could go either way. Then let's also look at the Fisher case where the Supreme Court sided for Trump. And some people may say, hey, this is just a completely biased Supreme Court, and they are appointed by Donald Trump, and they are just absolutely going crazy right now. Well, when you look at the decisions of the Supreme Court, most of them are unanimous. Most of them are not split along ideological lines. And we see a lot of people being unanimous. We also see John Roberts, I wrote an article about this, going against some things that Trump might do. We see other judges doing the same thing. I have no doubt that Scalia, rest his soul, would have been able to do that as well. Some more cases I think we got to talk about. We've got the Georgia State Election Board rules. In this case, this is more relevant to you, Sean. The Georgia Supreme Court declined to pause a lower court's ruling that voided 7 controversial rules passed by the state election board, including those related to hand counting and ballot examination. This just came out on October 23rd. The last one I talked about was October 30th. So these are going to be ripe. And here's basically what happened. In the lead up to the 2024 election, hundreds of election-related lawsuits brought across the country present a complex litigation landscape well before all ballots are counted. This is from Just Security that I'm talking about. And in the Just Security article, they go across many of these cases up to the 2024 election that are kind of bubbling up. The first one that they talk about is the election board challenges in Georgia. And the 7 controversial rules, I'm going to read them for you here that Just Security goes through. We could post a link to this page so that you can take a look at it. Just Security has been a pretty good site here to review some of these issues. The rules included a hand counting rule, a so-called reasonable inquiry rule, and an examination rule. There were others. The Georgia trial court declared that election superintendents have no discretion to delay or refuse certifying races. That's the most important part there. Other challenges remain pending at the trial court level, including Fulton and other counties, but most of the relief they've sought have been granted elsewhere. Let's go to this. Superintendents have no discretion to refuse certifying races. This was a very interesting ruling. And the thing that concerns me about this is they pretend that the action of certifying election results is purely ministerial. And it's not. It's not at all. The action of certifying elections is certifying and indicating that the rules have been followed. And if an election certifying official determines that the rules haven't been followed, This action is not ministerial, it's required. That's what was required of Mike Pence. That's why Donald Trump was saying, Mike, don't certify the election. Why? My court challenges are not up yet. They're pending. We have very real concerns that have not been resolved. And nobody's really come forward with information. They've only denied the court cases by saying you don't have enough information to say that this was fraudulently done, but we're not going to grant you discovery or a hearing or any sort of meaningful challenge. And so he was saying, Mike, don't certify this election. You shouldn't do it. It was Mike's call. Mike decided to certify the election. Trump was like, well, shit, Mike certified the election. What are we going to do? Walks away. Runs again. This is very American, right?
Yeah.
Do your job.
I don't have a problem with that.
Do your job. Oh, you didn't do your job? Okay, well, that sucks. Right? Court didn't do its job. Mike didn't do his job. Then we walk away and we deal with it. Well, that's what's happening in Georgia right now. They're saying ahead of time that the Mike Pence of Georgia, who's supposed to certify the election, has to declare the election. You're violating law of Georgia if you don't immediately stamp it. You've created a rubber stamp official. Now, do you think, Sean, that state constitutions are so ridiculous and state laws are so ridiculous that they have officials that are present to do acts, but that they take all power away from them to do those acts? Why would that person exist? Why don't we just put a machine there?
Well, I mean, is it a dog and pony show?
Well, exactly. That's what the judge declared. So we're going to see a challenge there. There's a ton. That's going to be a closely contested county. What do you think is going to happen in Georgia? You think it's going to go?
So I will tell you, I do. We have seen 55,000 registered Democrats change party in the state of Georgia. The early voter turnout, which I'm proud to say Jill and I went to early voting.
Yeah.
We cast our votes. The numbers of Republicans that have turned out in early voting significantly outweighed the numbers of those turning out for the Democratic Party. I think you're seeing that across the country at this point right now. And again, keeping in mind that, what transpires on November 5th on Election Day could be a complete opposite of what we've seen thus far. If the pattern continues, I honestly think that this could be a landslide election for Donald Trump if things continue the way that they have in the early voting. I just don't, in my opinion, and I've said this in the past, I have no issues with a female president. None whatsoever. I absolutely love Nikki Haley. I thought, she was somebody who, and I mean, look, so did a tremendous amount of the Republican Party during the primaries. I mean, it came basically down to her and Donald Trump. But, for me, I've got no issues with Kamala Harris as anything other than somebody who I just don't resonate with. I just don't believe that after 4 years of being the vice president of the United States, that she has the skills, the temperament, or the ability to lead this country in its critical time of need. And again, Tim Walz, I think, was the worst possible choice she could have made. And it's really funny for those who didn't hear it, and I think you may have heard this. She actually said that when she chose Tim Walz, she did it during a period of time where she was suffering from sleep deprivation. Did you see that?
Oh boy. Well,
did you actually see that? She said that.
No, I didn't see it. I want to get back on elections.
Yeah,
though.
come on, let's go.
Everybody. Yeah. So there's a couple of other challenges that we've got here. These DOJ quiet period challenges where the Department of Justice decided to file a bunch of lawsuits that was very interesting, removing the names from the voter rolls of certain people. There was an Alabama case before a district judge there that issued a preliminary injunction blocking that purge on August 16th. And I just was confused as I was reading these cases, why the DOJ is caring so much about who's on the voter rolls in certain states that they need to file litigation in courts blocking or I'm sorry, causing the removal of those names, purging the voter rolls. That made no sense to me. And I think that all you would have to do is make sure that the people who are involved in those states take the action that they need to in the states. This is a problem. The federal government does not have jurisdiction to address this. And we saw one judge issue an injunction against the Department of Justice. Then we have, obviously, the Republican National Committee versus Wetzel. That's the Fifth Circuit case that we previously talked about. Then we've got Mi Familia v. Fontes. And this case challenged 2 Arizona laws establishing new proof of citizenship standard for voters, requiring those who cannot meet the standards to be removed from the voter rolls. The case could have broad implications because the Republican National Committee and the Republican state legislators have argued that the Arizona law should stand because Congress lacks authority to regulate presidential elections. That law and all voter ID laws are really the problem here. Right. We've already seen indications. In fact, I think that guy who does those undercover operations, I can't remember the name of his show, but he's got a show where he usually tapes Democrats saying crazy things. It should just be called Democrats Say the Darndest Things. I'm pretty sure he goes on he has his people like pretend to be gay or something and go on a bunch of like Grindr dates with people and then get him talking, like getting him drunk, because it's always some low-level person who was not really involved in some campaign, just completely sloshed, right? And talking. What is this guy's name? You know it.
I can't tell you the guy's name.
We'll have somebody.
I know what you're talking about.
I can't remember it, but he does these great undercover investigations. I don't believe anything that anybody says on it. But he did an undercover investigation of some of the polling locations where people said like, "Hey, I'm from Germany. I'm brand new here. In kind of like a Borat way, right? I'm from Germany. Can I have a ballot?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure." And he's like, "Okay, well, I just got here yesterday, and I'm just on a trip, and I thought it would be fun to vote for Kamala, right?" And they're like, "Who did you say you're voting for?" And he's like, "Kamala." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, you could have a ballot. Totally take one. Here, we'll even help you fill it out. We have a pre-filled out one right here. We have that. Would you like the pre-filled out stack?"
We're laughing about this, but this is scary as hell.
This is happening. It's happening in our
country.
country.
It's scary as hell.
Yeah. Tucker Carlson has been visited by demons, and also people at polling locations. People at polling locations. Like everything's just going crazy right now.
Oh,
so
he had a weird day on the podium the other day at Madison Square Garden. That was kind of interesting with Tucker.
Yeah, I thought I had a joke about that whole thing. Yeah. A South African, a Samoan,
I saw it.
a South African, a Samoan,
don't get us canceled,
an Indian, 2 Democrats, and 2 combat veterans walk into a rally, and MSNBC cuts the feed on the racist, fascist Nazis.
Yeah.
Who's fascist?
Yeah.
Listen,
I don't want to detract from what we're talking about, but MSNBC, their entire organization should be ashamed of what they did with that Madison Square Garden and the comparison to 1939. Let me tell you something. There were Stars of David hanging from the rafters. Do you really think that's a Nazi party?
Let's play the garbage comment, I think. And then after that, let's put up who is the Mexican comedian who did the Mexican American comedian who did the same garbage thing. We'll play both of them.
Joe Rogan warned him about doing that.
Let's just play him. Let's just play him right now.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Where are my proud Latinos at tonight? You guys see what I mean? It's wide open. There's so many of them. It's absolutely incredible. Believe it or not, people, I welcome migrants to the United States of America with open arms. And by open arms, I mean like this. It's wild. And these Latinos, they love making babies, too. Just know that. They do. They do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. They come inside, just like they did to our country. There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
For those who think that this wasn't comedy and they think that he was like saying this, listen, we need to give freedom to comics. Give ultimate freedom. They're allowed to say anything and it's not declared offensive, even if it's not funny, even if you miss. Dave Chappelle needs to be able to do it. Andrew Dice Clay needs to be able to do it. I don't care if somebody walks out in a Hitler costume and makes jokes. It doesn't matter to me.
It's comedy.
Because parody is parody. And if we start judging it based on how we believe, especially how we believe that it ages, that's a problem, right?
I agree with you. And, here's the thing. If you go back and look at the context of the joke that he was telling, he was talking about landfills in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Landfills. And
you don't even need to defend the joke. It's just a joke.
I know, but people that don't think for themselves, people that don't independently research this stuff, and they listen to these sound bites and they listen to these chuckleheads on MSNBC and CNN calling everything racism. That's what they hear. And the fact is, I'm not defending the guy, but listen.
Defend him. It's fine. He's a comedian. You get immunity. It's comedian immunity. You get presidential immunity. You get immunity for filing lawsuits against people. If you say it in a pleading, you should be allowed. You should get immunity. There's prosecutorial immunity because we don't want prosecutors to be afraid of prosecuting people. That's just got to do your job. You get impeached. You need to get immunity for all of these types of things, Sean, because we need to be able to have a system of free speech and we need to be able to have a little fun. Like, morally, is that a problem? Should you shut the TV off if you're offended? That's up to you.
Yeah, turn the channel.
And MSNBC has the ratings of the History Channel anyway. So,
I think the History Channel has better ratings. Are you kidding me?
They're down there. I mean, for a national news organization, that's crazy. But listen, Sean, we got to wrap because I think we've gone as far as we need to.
Can we just talk about the Virginia case real quick?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, this one to me, I think was a huge win because the Supreme Court allowed Virginia to remove suspected non-citizens from their voter rolls. And the thing that bothers me about this case is Glenn Youngkin, the governor of the state, who I think is an outstanding governor, he was keeping with the tradition that his predecessors, who were Democrats, were doing the exact same thing. They were purging non-citizens from their voter rolls. What is wrong with that? Why was this something that the Justice Department, again, where you said the Justice Department doesn't have the authority to intervene in these state issues? Why all of a sudden? Is it because we have a Republican governor taking illegal immigrants off of the roll? Because again, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you have no right to vote in a U.S. election.
Yeah, the idea of purge is a bit of a problem for me. This is going to be an educated guess. Okay, Sean? If Donald Trump makes it into the White House, there are going to be investigations and likely prosecutions against certain people. And Sean, this may be one of the most important things that we've talked about. Donald Trump, when he takes office, if he wins, he's going to be able to do forensic audits of those elections. And he's going to be looking into all of that, probably with a task force. He's going to find a lot of people who did a lot of bad things in Fulton County and in other places. And these efforts seem to require purging of names from rolls. There's also going to be other documents from the DOJ that Donald Trump is going to get into. And it's very possible that he may find some serious misconduct that has been committed, especially during COVID. That's why they're fighting so hard. That's why the DOJ has been dispatched to these local places. Who knows what they're cleaning up right now? I mean, this is just very, very concerning. And so I don't even know if there's a circumstance under which they will allow him to take office because of what they know he may find. That's why they had Joe Biden as a puppet who was clearly senile, so that they could make these moves and sort of clean up what was going on and what they had to do to get the office. And this is very troubling. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with the Wuhan lab theory, with forensic audits of the actual election. And I'm not saying anything criminal has occurred. I'm saying he's going to look into it. And the way these people are acting is like there's something to cover up. I mean, they are Martha Stewart post trade right now, right? They are Enron post collapse right now. I feel like there's something very wrong just by the actions that they're currently taking, and Merrick Garland's shoddy appointment of Jack Smith, despite lacking congressional authority, in order to do a hatchet job against Donald Trump, to get out in front of the idea that he may take office and start investigating those very people. I would not want to be Jack Smith this morning if the votes last night looked pretty good for Donald Trump.
I agree with you 100%. Well, listen, Ron, as always, you bring the substance, I bring the comedic relief. Great episode, man. All right. To all of our followers, our listeners, happy post-election wall episode. Even though the election has happened, it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes for us to have a proper announcement as to who actually won the election. So I'm sure we're going to be talking about this coming forward. But these issues leading up to November 5th are so critical for you to understand, because future elections are at risk as well. And understanding where you come from to how you got to a certain place is so critical. So thanks for tuning in to The Wall. Ron and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, every wall can be and will be broken down with the right knowledge and strategies. So if you like what you heard, don't forget to click and survive below. Please connect with us on social media and join the conversation on The Wall. Remember, your feedback and support help to build a stronger community and brings you the content you care about. Stay tuned for our next episode and keep breaking down those walls. See you soon.